Okay, I think we can get started. Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We are very excited to talk a lot about birds today in our birding webinar on birding in the Emerald Necklace. During during these during the pandemic and social distancing, it's been tricky to find ways to remain engaged outdoors and kind of getting outside of the little boxes that are our apartments and our homes. But we think there are still many ways that we can, stay connected with nature and with one another and our communities, especially in the Emerald Necklace. We have 1,100 acres of land that we can safely explore from while adhering to our social distancing rules. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite parts about the Emerald Necklace. It is the small visitors and creatures that we get to share our parks with. And the reason why I find them so wonderful is I think that birds are such a great representation of the sheer biodiversity and what they represent, the natural history and of our world. And I think John Muir once said that when we try to we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. I really like that quote because there is just so much story behind every single little bird. Once we start to explore its habitat and its the way it interacts with other animals, and there's just such a much larger story that we can see. And so, without further ado, I would like to introduce some of my cohorts here, Kent Jackson and Erica Holm. And just so we know, before I do that, there will be a Q&A session for any of you after this. If you have any questions, feel free to just type it into the chat, and we will address those questions at the end of the meeting. And we are very much looking forward to being able to answer any questions that we can answer. Kent, Erica, and I, we're by no means any professional birders or anything. We don't do it for a living. We just, love the outdoors. We love exploring nature, and I think, if anything, we hope that this goes to show that anybody can get into birding and anybody can get involved with our parks. And we will do our best to answer any questions. And I think in a lot of ways, being amateurs ourselves, this will be a great stepping stone for you to get involved. It's not like, oh, what kind of binoculars do I need to get and all that. And like, nothing too technical. This is no advanced course. This is for everybody. So, Erica Holm is conducted field research on migratory songbirds in New Hampshire and Maine from 2014 to 2019. And after catching and banding over 6,000 individual birds of 98 species, you can't help but notice every time there's a flutter of wings in the bushes. So a lot of great insights from doing research that you can share with us after your experience there. And Kent Jackson, he is an experienced and seasoned educator with over 22 years of experience. Kent has successfully created, developed, directed, led, evaluated, and facilitated nature connection, outdoor adventure, environmental education, youth leadership, and wilderness living skills programs. Some of Kent's experiences include working as an environmental education facilitator, a ropes course facilitator, a rock climbing instructor, a canoeing instructor, and trip leader, a backcountry trip leader, a whitewater rafting guide, and a nature connection mentor and wilderness living skills instructor. I have had the pleasure of working with Kent. He's my supervisor at the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, and I always have a lot to learn from him. Just walking outdoors, he notices a lot of things that most people don't, and I think it's a very unique insight. And I look forward to hearing what he has to share. So, without further ado, Kent, could you tell us a little bit, anything I didn't cover there, and maybe a little bit about your relationship with birds? What do you think makes them so special?
For me, well, there's a number of things. What I'll focus on is their connection to the overall environment in terms of their body language, in terms of, the five voices of the birds. There, in terms of, for me, I've done a lot of wildlife tracking. In paying attention and listening and focusing to birds, they will let you know when an animal, predator, deer are nearby by what they say and how they display. So for me, they've helped me with my wildlife tracking significantly. In terms of my ability to listen deeply, they've helped me with that, and to move slowly and quietly through any landscape, and have helped me expand my awareness in general, things I wouldn't have recognized in the past, insect, plants, but specifically birds. They've taught me to move slowly and to be more aware. And through that, I've learned a whole host of things in reference to the natural world, but things that I can also take away a transcendent experience and I can apply in the overall environment, the overall modern world. So that's how I kind of sum of that up. There's more, but that sort of gets to the specifics.
Thank you, Kent. And yeah, I agree. There's so much connection and beyond just the bird itself, and I love that. Could you talk to me a little bit about like a specific encounter in nature and what the key takeaways of how animals interact with another and what we should look for?
Let's pick specific. Well, there are a few, I guess, in terms of raptors, birds. There's been a few incidences that I've been lucky to be aware of. This was a few years ago. I'm driving through, I was at a park, a DCR park, and I'd done some hiking, and I was coming back, and I had the windows in my pickup open, and I was slowly driving out of the park, and I heard blue jays just incessantly, just like jay, 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 making a whole host of racket, which I paid attention to, and I followed it, the sound, driving out. And as I got to a corner, I could hear it more clearly. So I stopped my truck, got out, and was walking. The path kind of went and then swung to the left, and I could hear that, that just getting super intense. And as I walked around the corner, there was a tree that had sort of fallen across the path. It wasn't fully on the ground. And there was a red-tailed hawk in the process of eating a chipmunk. I know it sounds kind of gruesome, but in the process of eating a chipmunk, and the blue jays were above it, kind of in this like umbrella shape. And they were basically alarming at the red-tailed hawk in the process of eating that chipmunk. And this gets into a whole another realm in terms of bird language, baseline behavior, alarm behavior, companion calls, the call, male-to-male aggression. There's a baseline voices, quote unquote, and activities you get to recognize among birds. Primarily for me, it's the passerines, the perching and songbirds. And when you're able to discern what those baseline voices and behaviors are, anything outside of that, for the most part, could be an alarm. And there are different shapes of alarm, which I can go into later if people have questions later. And I've had similar incidences with birds telling me where deer were, and ultimately being able to see a doe and her two fawns based on listening to the birds and positioning myself in a certain manner where ultimately I saw them walk by. So those are a couple of the incidences that come to mind. And I'm open to questions later if people want. And there's a wonderful book called entitled "What the Robin Knows." It's phenomenal in terms of learning about bird language.
Excellent, thank you. And just from a positionality standpoint, what do you think we as just humans can learn from birds personally? What should we take away from bird language, and how can we use it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think we need to understand that this isn't a new thing, and I'm not special. It's something that's been handed down through generations by various cultures, and I've been fortunate enough to work with people and be mentored by people who have taught me this. Takeaway, I guess, is that our ancestors used it, and it was something that for them it was a matter of life. So, in order for them to, avoid a lion, they ultimately learned what a specific bird would say when a lion was in the area. So it was a matter of life, right? It also let them know when a certain game animal was in the area, when a snake was nearby, a whole host of things. And bird language has been used, thousands of years. I don't know the specifics. In some cultures, like the Bushmen of the Kalahari, if you ask them if they know bird language, they will say no. But if you ask them, well, what does that bird say when a leopard is moving? Oh, I don't know because I'm not from there, but they specifically be like, oh, it makes this kind of noise and displays this way. So I guess the takeaway is in all of us, we can all learn this. It's not you don't have to be special. You don't have to be mentored by a elder or shaman, and that's none of that. If you take the time, in my opinion, you pick one bird to learn, you'll be able to pick the stuff up. It's a process. And the takeaway is that really through this, at least for me, I know I've learned so much about the natural world, but about myself in terms of my actions and my behavior. One quick thing I'll mention is, I used to come out my house, open the door, and go to my car, and I never really noticed much about birds. And then I got into bird language, and I ultimately realized that when I come out the door, they fly off, like take off out of, And slowing down and studying more bird language, I realized that when I come out in the morning, what they were doing is they were feeding. But before I was unaware and sort of disrespecting them. And they would ultimately, so I changed my behavior. I would slow down. I'd open the door slowly. I'd do the routines we can talk about later that I would follow. And ultimately, they didn't fly away. So in reflecting on that, what I realized that there were times that I was doing that in my life. When people were talking, I was coming in and not necessarily giving them the respect they needed. With my, family or friends or colleagues. So to help me to recognize that I create a wave of energy, and it can either be this, I don't say repulsive, but this strong energy that drives things away, or an energy that is more relaxed and calm and is a more welcoming energy that doesn't necessarily apply to when I'm out with the birds or tracking deer, but when interacting with my daughters or my wife or my colleagues. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. Yeah, definitely teaches you a lot more about how to move at a different pace in life and be a lot more aware of the effect you have on your surroundings. That's definitely something that we should all be thinking about as we explore. So, Erica, you kind of are on a little bit of a different side of this approach. You did a lot of research in doing bird banding and the effects of, I think it was power lines on bird habitat. And I'm actually, if you want to take a look, I'm posting a couple of articles in the group chat that you could take a look later at your own time. And but yeah, Erica, could you tell us a little bit more about your research and kind of what you learned from that and how that informed your knowledge of birds and how we can observe them?
Sure. So just to give everybody a little bit more information, I was working with the University of New Hampshire on a bird banding project. And if you don't know what bird banding is, it's a process where you actually physically catch birds out in their natural habitat, and you put a band on their leg. It's numbered individually. There's different sizes for every bird. I'm not encouraging anyone to go trying to do this. It's very heavily permitted, and it is illegal to kind of mess with or harm birds or interact with them physically unless you're doing this type of thing. So it was a really unique experience in which I got to handle a lot of birds up close and personal, really get to know them kind of almost on an individual personality level as well. And I learned so many things from it. It's something I did for 5 years. I worked on different types of projects within that. And yeah, Stephen touched on this, and you can check out the links, but we were working in New Hampshire and Maine. We were working at a bunch of different areas, including power line rights of way. So when Eversource or National Grid has to run lines through the world, they have to often clear parts of forests or use areas with low growing plants. So I was focused in specifically shrublands. My background here, this is a rhododendron background that would count as a shrub. So this isn't necessarily a shrubland that you're seeing here, but that's the type of plants that I would be finding my birds in. So not all of the 98 species I got to work with you'll find in the necklace, but a good portion of them you actually can find if you take a look at these habitats that kind of you might not think there are birds in. Does that answer the first part of your question, Stephen?
Absolutely, yes, thank you. And yeah, so what exactly, okay, so say I'm an amateur birder, what exactly, where should I be looking if I'm just looking for in the Emerald Necklace specifically, and what can I look for?
I would say you can look anywhere. This birding stuff, you would often think that, kind of what I said at the end there, sometimes if an area is heavily disturbed by humans, you might think, oh, this isn't a good place to bird. I'm not gonna see what I wanna see. If you have specific birds in mind, then you'll need to take into consideration the types of habitats that they might live in. But really any area that's around you, even right outside your bedroom window, you'll be able to participate in birding, slow down, as Kent said, and kind of get to know what's around you. But if you do have specific birds in mind, if you're interested in herons or birds of prey, bigger birds, less of the migratory stuff, you might want to seek out either edge habitats, so where a forest transitions into a grassland, or where the grassland runs into kind of a marshy bank of the river. In the Emerald Necklace, we are fortunate to have a lot of that type of habitat. The other day I saw robins along the bank of the river at the southwest corner of the Arboretum. What they're doing there is they're pecking at the ground. They're pulling out insects and worms. For robins specifically, they're after the worms. So you can see a lot. You might want to focus on, if you want to see a specific bird, what does that bird eat? So if you want to see American goldfinches, you would either have to have a bird feeder, or you'd need to go to an area that has a lot of seeds. They're seed eaters. Also areas with lots of insects. So if you know a place where you've been bitten by a lot of mosquitoes, you probably will find aerial insectivores there. And those can be things like flycatchers, which are really cool. I'm sure we have these in the necklace in kind of like the wetter, more overgrown areas. So you can look really anywhere, but if you have a specific bird in mind, then keep in mind what resources that bird might need.
Thank you very much. And kind of while we were talking about this, about birds, Kent, Eric, and I, you mentioned the word tenacity in birds. What can you talk a little bit more about that and what you mean by tenacity?
Yeah, so that was my favorite thing about birds is really their tenacity. And while I was thinking more about this, I have a second component to my favorite part about birds, and that's their mystery. So what I mean by tenacity is you see these birds and you think, oh, this bird lives here. And that's true for part of the year for most of the birds. But for some of them, it's really not true. Most of these birds fly thousands of miles. They travel through thunderstorms, snowstorms, everything that we get to stay inside for, they're outside for. So you see them in the bushes, you see them in the trees. I mean, imagine walking through some of these habitats as yourself and navigating this. No maps. They rely completely on just their built-in senses. So yeah, there's a lot of, and this ties in with mystery in that, you know, there's hundreds of birds in any given area. You might not see them all. They're all coexisting, they're fighting for resources. And we've studied birds for years and years. I mean, John James Audubon did his paintings, they all started from there. And it really has expanded, and there's been so much research done, but you still really never know what you're going to see out there. So that's where the mystery comes in. You know, it's like these fierce little creatures where you kind of can't predict them in all cases, and there's always something to learn from them, no matter how much we study them or even how much we integrate ourselves. There's still always going to be something to learn.
Absolutely. They are such a unique and small but large part of our world. And thank you for sharing that. So I would like to take the next few minutes to kind of open up the conversation to both you and Kent. And if you could talk to us a little bit about just if you were to treat us like 7-year-olds or something, and how do we start bird watching? What are some of the tips and tricks that you wish you knew when you first started? Yes, thank you.
Erica, you want to begin, or do you? All right. So for me, it was a continuation of just my journey in terms of my skills and experiences to want to learn more. And as Erica talked about, some birds, you know, are migratory. Some birds are year-round residents. And picking a bird that's a year-round resident for me was crucial. And I picked the American robin because they're everywhere, even in the winter, fall. They change. They don't spend as much time on the ground during the winter. Fall as well, later fall, they spend more time in the trees, and then they come down more in the spring and summer. And I started with the American robin because they were everywhere. And for me, it was a way to delve into quote unquote bird language. And by picking a space, and luckily they're in, probably almost every yard and field, in Massachusetts and, New England, and they're everywhere. So it's a good bird to initially learn. So I took that, took on that challenge and began to observe. I would go to either outside my house or a certain location that had that habitat that specifically, was conducive to robins, and I watched. And for me, I took notes. You don't have to do that. If you don't want to do that, you just go and enjoy the bird, watching it, learning, what it likes to eat, where it likes to get its food from, how it moves when it's in that feeding baseline relaxed behavior, learning what its song is. Help me learn to listen deeply to the most subtle sound quietly. And what you find is when you do that, for me, I should say, I'd be somewhere, I'd pick up, oh yeah, I hear a little butterfly over here, the subtle sound, but I'm still listening to the robin. It helped tune my senses Um, so I guess I'll go on with how I did it. I would pick a bird that's common. I would learn about it. I would then look at learning its baseline behaviors, which are its songs. So when it's singing and it's, up on a perch or a post, it is relaxed, not nervous. So it's doing what it's not an alarm behavior, and you hear that beautiful song. So I learned the song. Then I learned it's so male to male aggression, which is another voice, so to speak, or aspect, what that looks like. So I went through I've learned all of the baseline behaviors, and then I moved on to the alarm behaviors, what those looked like, what happened when a hawk came by, what happened when a cat came by. And you don't have to be detailed about it, but if you want to, you can map right down, get over by the lawn under the apple tree. It was walking around, stopping, walk around, they were stopping to peck and pick up a worm. So I read that behavior. And then I would associate their behaviors with different things that were going on in the landscape and pick one bird. Start with one bird. How I did it was my opinion. If you're into at least the bird language piece, pick one bird. Get to know that bird. For me, it was the robin. I got to know the robin. It's behaving in the wintertime. It's, spring, the summer, where it likes to nest. The begging call of its young, what the juveniles look like when they're on the ground, when they're following their parents and their parents are feeding them, what their behavior looks like when the hawk comes by. What that does is it gives you a full spectrum of quote unquote birding, right? So identification, song, its habitat, if it's migratory, if it's local. And then also, if you want, you can transcend that and look at it more personally. So I learned what it means to the environment. What does this mean for me? So for me, it helped me be more quiet, sit still, be more observant, be more reflective, and I could use it in other parts of my life. But I started with one bird, and to really increase my tracking skill. But that was my first reason. But through doing it, now I love birds. I've studied different birds. It's helped me profoundly in general in terms of my teaching in my classes, courses, and experiences. And that do not get overwhelmed. Don't expect to learn every single, just birds or the specifics about a robin. It'll take you time. But to sum it up, focus on one bird that's a year-round bird, get to know it year-round, and you will improve in many areas of birding.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kent. There's indeed a lot of birds out there, and I know that it could be very overwhelming, and like there's so much to pay attention to. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of value in trying to hone your focus in on one thing specific, and you'll find that there's just so much you can learn even from something as common as a robin.
I add one thing. I'm sorry. Can I add one thing?
Oh, please. Yeah.
Shut up. What will happen? I know it because it's happened for me and actually for my daughters as well. After that, when you do that for whatever period of time, you will see birds you've never ever seen before, because your vision expands, your hearing expands, and you're gonna look. For me, it was a dark-eyed junco. I'm like, what is that? They're not here year round, but they come in the fall, and I'd never seen one all my life. But based on that robin and focusing on that robin, I won't go into detail. I learned so many more birds that are here, that are beautiful song and just behaviors because of my experience with the robin.
Thank you. I'm going to turn the mic over to Erica.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree with that so much, Ken. Once you start seeing them, you kind of don't stop seeing them. So it's a really great exercise to, yeah, just focus on that one specific bird, whatever captures your interest. You know, a common bird is great if you know of something, like if you're always walking in the woods and you just hear a beautiful sound and you want to focus on something based on something that you hear a lot and you've just kind of always known that it's out there, but you don't know what it is. That's another good way. You don't necessarily even have to be able to see them all the time. One of the things that I thought about was when Ken was talking was that when I first started birding, it was actually as a part of research. So I had to learn a lot of birds at once, and it was very overwhelming. So I do agree you should kind of tone it down and pick one thing you're interested in at first. But you know, kind of what I realized with that was that my bird that I chose that I really just was amazed by at first was the indigo bunting, because I had never seen one. I had to learn its call. We kind of think that it sounds like lasers, like those laser guns in the Star Wars movies or something. They have a really interesting call, and they like to have perches kind of out in the middle of, you know, a shrubby, grassy kind of mixture of fields. So they like to have these high singing perches. And when you see them up close, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with indigo buntings, but they're this vibrant blue. It's like a structural feather color that they have, and they're just amazing. I mean, it's indigo for a reason. So yeah, pick something that really appeals to you, or if you're just out there and you hear something and you haven't either heard it before or you hear it a lot but you've never seen what's making that sound, chase after it. I mean, it's really a kind of also a playful exercise with the senses too, to hear something and kind of just feed into that curiosity of noticing it.
Definitely try to, and then in the act of noticing, I think you're going to find, you know, there's a lot of you, including myself, probably are feeling very stressed right now with the way life is going, but you know, it is a great opportunity for you to just find some peace and quiet and to really just focus on just one singular and beautiful thing that we have in the world. So thank you, Kent and Erica. We're now actually going to take the last few minutes to talk a little bit about or answer any of your questions. So our first question, and our only question right now, so people, please ask questions, is from Jeremy. He says that I know that phase 2 of the Army Corps Muddy River project is going to progress over the next 2 to 3 years and includes removing a lot of the invasive reeds along the shoreline, including near the BFD control center. Do you know what the plan is to reduce the harm to birds during this time? I know a couple of herons like that area.
So I have actually heard from our president on this one just now. She reports that the Army Corps of Engineers and the contractors who are doing the on-the-ground work are required to submit plans to show the timing of all their work. Timing is important for nesting and also feeding behaviors of young for a lot of these birds. They have to report that to the federal and state agencies to show their compliance with all of the protections that actually are still in place for birds. Birds are quite heavily protected, so there will be mitigation plans in there. They will avoid the breeding and nesting periods, and there may be a biologist on site at certain points if as needed, just to mitigate those things. We think it's great that people are on the lookout for this. That's awesome that you're noticing the herons, appreciating that area. And we want to continue to make sure that these types of things get talked about. So thank you so much for mentioning that. And then on the kind of ecological side of things, my general answer would be that the invasive reeds in these areas around the Muddy River are Phragmites, and they are an invasive species, as you mentioned. They wouldn't have been representative of the Muddy River's natural habitat. There actually was Phragmites in small amounts along the Muddy River back when it was tidal, so before the dams were put in. There was actually salt in the water, and that actually kept the Phragmites at a manageable level. But now that it's a freshwater river, Phragmites can take advantage of that and just sprout up into a monoculture. So the better option for these riverbanks anyway would be to restore natural mixtures of plants, which also equals more diverse food and habitat sources for native birds. So it's a tricky situation, but we'll be monitoring the legal side of things. And also on the habitat side, we would want there to be a mixture of native plants there in the future.
Thanks very much, Erica. So this next question, I think, from Kimberly Hobart is, how can I observe a bird nest without disrupting or scaring the mom and babies? Very, very good question. Thank you. And I'm going to turn this one over to Kent, who's our resident nimble person. He's an expert at being non-disruptive. So Kent.
It's the expert. So yeah, it depends on what type of bird, I think, in terms of its where it is, high in the canopy, low in the canopy. But in general, you need to do not overcrowd the space. So if it's a shrub and they're in the shrub, take some time, spend distance from the actual shrub and the nest. And I would determine my approach in terms of how close, and if I could, for instance, if you have to walk on a path and there's a shrub right here and you're walking by, that it'll disturb the babies as well as the mom, find a different approach, look from a distance, and you can, you don't only need binoculars, you don't need an expensive pair of binoculars, but the further away you are, the less of an impact you'll be. But also when, for instance, when you're approaching, so if you're approaching the shrub just right in front of you, don't walk directly towards it, right? So the shrub's in front of you, come at it from an angle. If I'm not going to articulate or show you, but if this is the shrub, don't come right at it. Come at it from an angle, give it a distance, and when you do, walk up and then turn your shoulder sideways like this to the nest or to the shrub, because that way you're actually breaking tension. Like if you're walking down the street and someone walks towards you like this, it's more of a aggressive posture. So more sideways, and then kind of relax. What I'll do is kind of corny, but I'll pretend to maybe like nibbling something at a good distance, and I'll watch out the corner of my eye. And I'll watch her body language, its body language. And if it's rigid and looking at me like this, I know that she's upset or he's upset, depending on who's watching the nest on the species. So I'll slowly try and break that tension. I look away and slowly at the corner of eye, you can see it will roll, kind of relax its posture and go back to feeding. Then, you can focus more of your attention on it and then look at it with your binoculars or your naked eye, depending upon how open, visible it is in terms of the nesting site. That'd be my suggestion. Erica, do you have any suggestions you want to offer?
I think that sounds great. My experience with kind of approaching nests, I wasn't doing that part of the research. There are some researchers who do go and put like nest cams up or these things called eye buttons, which actually measure the temperature of the nest. So you can see when a mother bird is coming back and how often. But for a beginner or someone who's just looking to observe a nest, yeah, it really is just about kind of like being really quiet. I have a friend who has a Christmas wreath on her door. It's her front door, so it's not really something that she can avoid. She tries to take it down every year, but every year house sparrows build a nest in her Christmas wreath. So it's always Christmas at her house. And what she does is she will just be really slow about opening the door, like just only use it when she absolutely has to. And that type of bird is actually very resilient. So I just add that it depends on the species a lot, like you said, Kent. Like their behaviors are different. Some are more sensitive than others. A house sparrow is used to people. I wouldn't say go up to the nest, like really try to get close to it. But when you see a bird coming back and forth from the same spot, you are observing their nest just from a little bit of a different perspective.
Excellent. Thank you very much for both of you. I'm kind of going to try to combine these next two questions, I think, from Rob Meyer. What resources do you recommend for learning bird calls? And from Judy Mortner, for a complete beginner, do you recommend buying a pair of binoculars? If yes, what's a good pair? Beginning pair, good website for a beginner to start learning identifications, or some good program to get started. So I have actually posted a few links that I found really useful, and they're links to various apps. So the first one is eBird, which is by Cornell, I believe, and they have an awesome library of research going on there. And one of their apps is called Merlin, and that is a great identification tool. It'll say like, oh, what size was it? Where did you see it? What colors were there? Where did you observe it? Like, was it in a bush or in a tree or on the ground? And it'll use this information to kind of narrow that down. Additionally, iNaturalist is kind of more of a general tool for just all things outdoors, and it's basically a Pokedex, but real life. And you can kind of take a picture of something, and it'll be shared with like all of these amateur naturalists that are on the app, and they can collaborate and help you identify. They'll come back to you, and they'll try to answer what you got going on there. And iNaturalist also developed an app called Seek, which allows you to just take that picture, and it kind of searches the web for similar images. It's not 100% accurate, but it's pretty useful, and it'll help you identify a lot of things. Other than that, I'm going to just kind of turn this over to Erica and Kent. Erica, do you have anything to add to that?
I sure do. So those are some great resources, Stephen. Those are absolutely awesome for getting started. Specifically with birds, I do have a lot of that reference material. Having done research on them, you have to refer to this stuff all the time. So I would definitely recommend Cornell's website. If you Google any bird's name and Cornell, you can get a very detailed page on their natural history. That is my go-to source for anything I need to know about birds. As for the learning your calls, the strategy that was recommended to me and that I used in the beginning, in combination with going out in the field, is the Peterson Field Guide to Bird Sounds. It's actually like a recorded CD. My strategic method when I had to learn a lot of bird calls all at once was to pop that in my car, and then every time I was driving somewhere, I would just listen to that. And it takes so many hours to learn like 100 bird calls. It really is tough, but that's one thing you can do if you want to learn a lot fast, or if you just have a specific bird that you want to hear. And none of this stuff really requires a purchase, I would say. The Peterson sound guides can often be found in libraries. I've rented it from the library in several different locations. So I would say definitely check out the bird resources in your local library as well.
Yeah, I echo both what Stephen and Erica have just mentioned. I too rely a lot on the Cornell All About Birds and some other resources. I was smiling because Erica did the same thing and got my wife crazy with the birds. My children too. What is that? Turn it off. Anyway, yeah, the repetitive nature, listening. All About Birds, the Cornell website, not just identification, but Erica mentioned a whole host of things in terms of life history and habitat and migration, as well as there's on their site there's a piece where you can how to learn bird calls. So check that website out. They will just great resource. I use I have a book, and it's more about bird language. It's called What the Robin Knows. And John Young, and I can't think somewhere here, the other authors, phenomenal book. And next year we plan on adding at least bird language to our offerings in the spring. So stay tuned for that. But the binocular piece, I mean, it depends what you're looking to do with it. If it's more about identifying and being able to identify X amount number of birds, you may require, binoculars, and based on the species Eric mentioned before, some are more accommodate people better than others. Some are more secretive, so you may require some binoculars. In terms of specifics, a lot of different brands out there, and there's some for hunting and low light and specific light and birding. So I'd have to recommend getting on the website and do research, a website I should say, unless Erica or Steven. I mean, I have a brand, but they're more for for deer, low light circumstances. But I'd recommend just doing some research, and you don't have to spend a lot of money on them. Get a decent pair, and from my experience, they'll do you fine.
I agree, Kent, definitely. Good recommendations. Yeah, for binoculars, kind of controversial opinion for a birder, but I would suggest just using your eyes at first and really learning what you can see on your own. It's, a lot of birders really love their binoculars, so it's no offense to anyone who really likes to use them. In my research, I had to use this, I think it was like $150 pair of binoculars. That was only for the first 2 years of my research, where I had to be able to scope out specific color combinations of color bands on their birds' legs while they were flying around. So that's not really something a beginner will ever need to do. And otherwise, I kind of found that they inhibited me from doing birding as much, because it was another thing I had to equip myself with. But if you're someone who likes to use equipment and likes to gear up and go out, I would say get a pair that's like $50 or less, at least to start. And if you find you get really passionate about it and you really want to see a certain thing, then you can always upgrade. The other thing I'll mention is that when our visitor center reopens, which I do hope will be sometime, at least so we could catch fall migration, we do have birding kits. We have binoculars in them that we can rent out to people. So when we reopen, keep an eye out for that, and we can lend you a pair of really high quality binoculars that you can take out.
Thank you both. Yeah, and I would like to kind of echo what Erica and Ken have said. You don't really need, I wouldn't get too hung up on, getting binoculars and getting the right guides and everything when you're just starting, especially because you don't want to miss out on the opportunities so I think a very common beginner mistake is you spot a bird that you've never seen before and you get really excited, and then you're flipping through your guide trying to identify it, and you're trying to pull your binoculars back up to see it, and in between that time when you're messing about with your guidebook, it flies away and it's gone just like that. So think about what you missed there. You missed the opportunity to really observe its behavior and see what it's up to, and those are the real key things that'll help you in the long run be able to identify them better. Being able to recognize the types of behavior they're exhibiting. Where are they sitting? Where are they standing? How are they feeding? These little things, are they in a group? These little things really add up and help you become an overall better birder. So don't worry too much about that. Just think a little bit more about your observation skills and take these little mental notes in your head as you're observing. So our next question is from, I believe, Nance. When were bluebirds first noticed in New England? I thought they only existed in Disney films. I've never seen one, but people find it miraculous. I agree, the bluebird is quite amazing. They are a little bit trickier to spot, especially because they tend to migrate during the winters, but in recent years, more and more bluebirds have been spotted during the winter, probably because, I don't know, climate change. But besides that, I think if you want to really spot an eastern bluebird, one thing that might help is they tend to feed on soft fruits, and so if you want, you'll most likely find them in bird boxes and bird houses. So in the history of eastern bluebirds, I can't really say exactly when they were first spotted, but during the mid-20th century, a lot of eastern bluebirds kind of dwindled quite a bit because of competition with house sparrows. But thanks to efforts of amateur birders such as yourselves, A lot of people have put out more bird boxes to help them survive, and they've definitely seen an increase in population recently. So those are things to keep in mind. If you want to spot an eastern bluebird, you can definitely try a birdhouse, and they also tend to be in open field areas as well. Kent and Erica, do you have anything to add to that?
I've handled bluebirds before, so I guess that's just my experience with them, is that they are really beautiful up close, and they're especially magnificent to watch because they do kind of act like they're in a Disney film as well. There was one particular memory where I had a female adult bluebird fly into the mist nets, which are what we use to catch and band the birds. And just as soon as that happened, while I was working with that bird, the male is kind of darting above my head, and the young had fledged at this point. So then the whole family is like trying to attack me to let go of their mom, which I did recently after. And I got to band the family of bluebirds. So it was just a nice memory, and they are a really awesome bird.
Yeah, nothing to add from me.
Sorry, you're on mute, Steve.
I am. All right. Thank you both. That is it for questions. I'm going to just, wait here, do my teacher thing and wait for 20 seconds and see if anyone else has any questions before we wrap up. All right, going once, going twice. Okay. Thank you all very much. So before we go, I would just like to take this time to promote our online resources. So for the latest updates on the Emerald Necklace Parks and Conservancy, you can visit our website at emeraldnecklace.org or follow us on social media through Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. For tips and resources for visiting the parks in a healthy and responsible way, you can visit emeraldnecklace.org/here4you. And what else? For self-guided tours of the park or to explore Emerald Necklace from home, visit our mobile tour guide using your mobile device at emeraldnecklace.tours. And I'm actually going to just post the links for all of these on the chat right now. And Kent and Erica, do you have anything to share about our online presence?
Sure. So I have been working on updating a bird guide that's specifically for very common birds of the emerald necklace. I could share my screen and show you guys that right now. What do you think about that, Steve?
Yep, sounds good to me.
Okay, so I'll share my screen and we'll get a little bit of pictures going on here. So we'll have old friends like the blue jay, the robin, Kent's favorite here. You can also see red-breasted nuthatch, downy woodpecker, and we're just providing this as an overview of what you might see. Everything from raptors to wetland birds to migratory songbirds, year-round residents, catbirds. Sometimes if you hear a cat on your walk, it's not actually a cat. Mockingbird, sometimes when you hear an ambulance, it might not be an ambulance. Cardinals, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen and loved. And so we'll be posting this probably next week, and you guys can access that and get out in the parks and do some birding.
Thanks, Erica. Kent, anything?
Yeah, to get a map of the Emerald Necklace, you can go to our website, which is emeraldnecklace.org, and download a electronic map, which will allow you to, along with the bird guide, you'll be able to pick a location in the park to maybe start learning about one of these magnificent birds.
Thanks, Kent. All right, everybody, I want to thank you all for joining us today and being part of this conversation. I hope it has been insightful for you in some ways and that it'll give you an opportunity to really explore all of the parkland that we have to offer and get to visit our little bird friends as well. So thank you all for joining and have a good one. Bye.